200 TEDx events around the world, 60 countries, including there's a TEDx Sanaa live in Yemen, TEDx Annaba live in Algeria, there's TEDx Baghdad is being held. How exciting is that? There's a TEDx in Qingdao, China, and one in Port-au-Prince, Haiti. So, to all of you and to every other TEDx that's joining us, thank you. You know, we think that it's great that you can be with us today. You picked a great day. Because we have 4 sessions coming up today that I'm honestly as excited for as anything that's happened at TED. A lot of the speakers are from the Talent Search Tour, amazing diversity of people, and in the session we get to talk about disruption. Disrupt. You know, we all know that organizations have a tendency, especially when they get good and successful, to become a little bit complacent. They do more of what they were already good at. And it kind of opens the door wide open for someone else to come in, see the world a little bit differently, and do something that leaves them as a bystander. Sometimes the choice is to think disruptively or to be a bystander. So one of the big drivers of this disruption is this power of open. That at TED we fall in love with, so many of you have shown us how to do it. And one question for you is, you know, it's applied in lots of areas that we know about, you know, from software to writing to mainstream media, etc., etc. What about architecture? What about architecture? What would that look like? When we were in London, we met an amazing young architect who had some big thoughts and ideas around this. He subsequently won one of the City 2.0 TED Prizes, and I'm delighted to introduce you to Alistair Parvin.
When we use the word architect or designer, what we usually mean is a professional. Someone who gets paid. And we tend to assume that it's those professionals who are going to be the ones to help us solve the really big systemic design challenges that we face, like climate change, urbanisation, social inequality. That's our kind of working presumption. And I think it's wrong, actually. In 2008, I was just about to graduate from architecture school after several years and go out and get a job, and this happened. The economy ran out of jobs. And a couple of things struck me about this. One, don't listen to career advisors. And 2, actually this is a fascinating paradox for architecture, which is that as a society we've never needed design thinking more, and yet architecture was literally becoming unemployed. It strikes me that we talk very deeply about design, but actually there's an economics behind architecture that we don't talk about, and I think we need to. And a good place to start is your own paycheck. So, as a bottom of the wrong architecture graduate, I might expect to earn about £24,000. It's about $36,000 to $37,000. Now, in terms of the whole world's population, that already puts me in the top 1.95 richest people, which raises the question of who is it I'm working for? The uncomfortable fact is that actually almost everything that we call architecture today is actually the business of designing for about the richest 1% of the world's population. And it always has been. The reason why we forgot that is because the times in history when architecture did the most to transform society were those times when actually the 1% were built on behalf of the 99% for various different reasons, whether that was through philanthropy in the 19th century, communism in the early 20th, the welfare state, and most recently, of course, through this inflated real estate bubble. And all of those booms, in their own various ways, have now kicked the bucket. And we're back in this situation where the smartest designers and architects in the world are only really able to work for 1% of a clever business strategy, actually. I think the challenge facing the next generation of architects is how are we going to turn our client from the 1% to the 100%? And I want to offer 3 slightly counterintuitive ideas of how it might be done. The first is, I think we need to question this idea that architecture is about making buildings. Actually, a building is about the most expensive solution you can think of to almost any given problem. And fundamentally, that mass architecture is about big buildings and big finance. Actually, we've got ourselves locked into this industrial era mindset, which says that in order to build at scale, the only people who can make cities are large organisations, or not just by the few with a lot, but also by the many with a bit. And when they do, they bring with them a completely different set of values about the place that they want to live. And it raises really interesting questions about how will we plan cities, how will we finance development, how will we sell design services, what would it mean for democratic societies to offer their citizens a right to build. But from a strictly economic point of view, design shares a category with sex and care of the elderly. Mostly it's done by amateurs. And that's a good thing. Most of the work takes place outside of the monetary economy, in what's called the social economy or the core economy, which is people doing it for themselves. And the problem is that up until now it was the monetary economy which had all the infrastructure and all the tools. So the challenge we face is how are we going to build the tools, the infrastructure and the institutions for architecture's social economy. And that began with open source software. And over the last few years, it's been moving into the physical world with open source hardware, which are freely shared sheets of plywood. What these technologies are doing is radically lowering the thresholds of time and cost and skill. They're challenging the idea that if you want something to be affordable, it's got to be one size fits all. And they're distributing massively really complex manufacturing capabilities. We're moving into this future where the factory is everywhere. And increasingly that means that the design team is everyone. That really is an industrial revolution. When we think that, the major ideological conflicts that we inherited were all based around this question of who should control the means of production. And these technologies are coming back with the solution, actually, maybe no one. All of us. And we were fascinated by what that might mean for architecture. So, about a year and a half ago, it goes together without any bolts. It uses wedge and peg connections. And even the mallets to make it can be provided on the cutting sheets as well. And a team of about 2 or 3 people working together can build this. They don't need any traditional construction skills. They don't need a huge array of power tools or anything like that. And they can build a small house of about this size in about a day. And what you end up with is just the basic chassis of a house, onto which you can then apply systems like windows and cladding and insulation services based on what's cheap and what's available. And, of course, the house is never finished. We're shifting our heads here, so the house is not a finished product. With a CNC machine, the idea of be lazy like a fox. Don't reinvent the wheel every time. Take what already works and adapt it for your own needs. Contrary to almost everything that you might get taught at an architecture school, copying is good. Which is appropriate. Because actually, this approach is not innovative. It's actually how we built buildings for hundreds of years before the Industrial Revolution, these sorts of community barn raisings. The only difference between traditional vernacular architecture and open source architecture might be a web connection. But it's a really, really big difference. So, we shared the whole of WikiHouse under a Creative Commons license, and now what's just beginning to happen is the groups around the world are beginning to take it and use it and hack it and tinker with it, and it's amazing. There's a cool group over in Christchurch in New Zealand looking at, these are the guys who are going to be making it. You know, like it or not, welcome to the world's biggest design team. So, if we're serious about problems like climate change, urbanisation, and health, actually, our existing development models aren't going to do it. As I think Robert Muir said, there isn't a bank or a corporation or a government or an NGO who's going to be able to do it if we treat citizens only as consumers. How extraordinary would it be, though, if collectively we were to develop solutions not just to the problem of structure that we've been working on, but to infrastructure problems like solar-powered air conditioning, off-grid energy, off-grid sanitation. Low-cost, open-source, high-performance solutions that anyone can very, very easily make. And to put them all into a commons where they're owned by everyone and are accessible by everyone. a kind of Wikipedia stuff. And once something's in the commons, it will always be there. How much would that change the rules? And I think the technology...
It's incredible just how light this thing is. I mean, this is something you can pick up and carry with you anywhere you go. So, I'll leave you with one of the most compelling facts about this technology and these kinds of vehicles. This uses 20 times less energy for every mile or kilometer that you travel than a car. Which means not only is this thing fast to charge and really cheap to build, but it also reduces the footprint of your energy use in terms of your transportation. So instead of looking at large amounts of energy needed for each person in this room to get around in a city, now you can look at much smaller amounts and more sustainable transportation. So next time you think about a vehicle, I hope, like us, you're thinking about something new. Thank you.
So, this book that I have in my hand is a directory of everybody who had an email address in 1982. Actually, it's deceptively large. There's actually only about 20 people on each page, because we have the name, address, and telephone number of every single person. And in fact, everybody's listed twice, because it's sorted once by name and once by email address. It's obviously a very small community. There were only 2 other Dannies on the internet yet. I knew them both. We didn't all know each other, but we all kind of trusted each other. And that basic feeling of trust sort of permeated the whole network. And there was a real sense that we could depend on each other to do things. So just to give you an idea of the level of trust in this community, let me tell you what it was like to register a domain name in the early days. Now, it just so happened that I got to
When I was 14 years old, I had low self-esteem. I felt I was not talented at anything. One day, I bought a yo-yo. When I tried my first trick, it looked like this. I couldn't even do the simplest trick, but it was very natural for me because I was not dexterous and hated all the sports at all. But after 1 week of practicing, my throat became more like this. A bit better. I thought the yo-yo is something for me to be good at for the first time in my life. I found my passion. I was spending all my time for the practicing. It took me hours and hours a day to build my skill up to the next level. And then, 4 years later, when I was 18 years old, I was standing on stage at the World Yo-Yo Contest, and I won. I was so excited. Yes, I did it. I became a hero. I may get many sponsors, a lot of money, a lot of interviews, and be on TV, I thought. But after coming back to Japan, totally nothing.